So here's a demonstration of Tp-Castt using a poem called The Eagle. Now I've asked you to use poems of at least 10 lines, but I want you to see how you can apply this to a shorter poem and get so much from the poem and that helps you to develop meaning and understanding. So here's the poem. It's called The Eagle, and it's by Alfred Lord Tennyson. And first let's read the poem, and then we'll come back and start our analysis. So here's the entire poem. He clasps the crag with crooked hands, close to the sun in lonely lands, ringed with the azure world he stands. The wrinkled sea beneath him crawls, he watches from his mountain walls, and like a thunderbolt he falls. That's our entire poem. On its own, okay, it's a poem about an eagle, so what? But when we use this Tp-Castt process of analyzing poetry, we find a whole lot more in the poem than maybe we first expected. So the first T is title. What does the title make you think of? And this is just an opportunity for you to think about what the title means in general. The eagle. Well, an eagle is a representative of power and authority. It's a symbol of America. It's a symbol of freedom. All I'm doing here is trying to make connections between what the title is and what I already understand. I'm just trying to predict what the poem might be about. I'm not worrying about who Alfred Lord Tennyson is. I know he's British. It's an American symbol, we say, of freedom. But I'm not worrying about any of that. Just what does the title make me think of? Second is to paraphrase the poem. And here, all we're trying to do again is not interpret the poem, but paraphrase it. So what is it that's going on in the poem? Well, the eagle is standing on top of a mountain, and the sun and sky are above him. So we see him perched at the very top of this mountain, close to the sun and lonely land. So we see him at the top of this mountain, and above him is the sun and the sky. Below him, the ocean moves in waves. The wrinkled sea beneath him crawls. He watches what happens below him, and then suddenly he dives down. Why suddenly? Because he falls like a thunderbolt. Okay. So that's my understanding so far. We're just paraphrasing. We're not trying to interpret deeply. Just paraphrase. Next is connotation, or what the words mean beyond just simply their dictionary definition. So we start to listen for how the poet uses words, and we start to listen for meanings that go beyond just what the word means. For example, crooked. Crooked just means, crooked, not in a straight line, a crooked line. So let's look at that first line. He clasps the crag with crooked hands. Well, a crag is a rocky outcropping on the top of this mountain. This isn't a meadow that he's standing on at the top of the mountain. It's not a moss-covered piece of rock that's been worn away by rain and wind. It's a crag. It's jagged and rocky. So we already have this image that conjures up an idea of it being hard and rough. And then crooked hands, I imagine an old person with arthritis. I imagine this eagle as somebody who represents that old authority figure. The next image we have is the wrinkled sea. And wrinkles also suggest to me old age, like the wrinkled skin of an old person. And that sea crawls below the eagle. Why is it crawling? Is it like a baby who's crawling? Well, if it's an old person, maybe it's not crawling like a baby. I put like a defeated wrestler or like somebody else who's been defeated. Maybe that's it, because the eagle is supposed to have authority and power. Is it like someone who's been defeated who is broken or dying? That's possible. We can come back to that. We can decide how is it that the wrinkled sea crawls. I get that it's probably showing the movement of the ocean, the waves, but why crawls? That answer has to do with connotation. Mountain walls. By the time we get to mountain walls, we're not just talking about the walls of a mountain. We're talking about a personified eagle. We keep talking about the eagle as he. He's standing. He's lonely. He's watching. This is making us think of the eagle as a person. If he's a person, if he's an authority, what do mountain walls remind us of? Maybe a king, maybe a fortress. Maybe this is not just his mountain home where he has his nest, but think of it literally as a kind of fortress. Okay? And then finally, like a thunderbolt, he falls. Thunderbolt makes us think of power. Thunderbolt makes us think of Zeus, that god of ancient Greece. He used a thunderbolt for his weapon. We can talk about whether or not Tennyson was familiar with Greek mythology and whether he would use that as a symbol for a god. He would, and he does, and he is. He's all those things. But regardless, thunderbolt suggests power. Even if we don't think mythology, thunderbolt means power. Falls is an interesting word because when a city falls, we mean it's been defeated. But we can also talk about a bomb that falls, and a bomb does great damage. So is the eagle who falls like a thunderbolt falling like a bomb or like a weapon upon that which it sees below? Or has something happened that has caused the eagle to fall from his position of authority, to fall from his mountain walls, and to be defeated himself? Depends on how we read the poem. Next is attitude. Attitude is the tone that the poet is trying to get us to feel. We know that the eagle is at the top of this mountain, close to the sun in lonely lands, ringed with the azure world. He's all by himself. Furthermore, he's behind these mountain walls, or he's surrounded by this fortress. So I really see him as being lonely and alone. How we read the word falls is going to determine the rest of the attitude of the poem. Next is shifts. Shifts are where we want to watch for how the poem changes, how the poem teaches us something that we didn't expect, how the poem moves from one understanding to the next. In a Shakespearean sonnet, we know the first 8 lines propose some sort of problem, and the final 6 propose a solution. There's an obvious and predictable shift in a Shakespearean sonnet. In this poem, it's the last line. Up to the last line, it's all about the eagle being lonely and alone and powerful and authoritative. And then the last line, and like a thunderbolt he falls. He's no longer on the mountain. He is either attacking like a thunderbolt, or he's been defeated and falling fast. And again, how we read the poem depends on how we describe that shift. We look at the title again. Now that we've read through the poem, now that we've thought about it in these terms, what does the title mean? Well, the eagle now seems to me less to be about power and authority and more about the solitary existence of those in power or authority. The eagle is powerful and like a thunderbolt, but the prevailing image is of the eagle as alone. Now, whether this is a poem about eagles or a poem about authority figures in general, that central image of aloneness, if you'll let me use that word, makes us rethink the grandeur of the eagle. Finally, the theme. What is it that the poem means? What is it that we can derive from the poem in terms of overall message? The theme of the poem here centers on the loneliness of the eagle. We've established that through connotation, and we've established it through our paraphrase, and we've established it through our re-examination of the title. One of the greatest images of nature is that of the nobility and authority of the eagle, but here he is again all by himself. And maybe one of the things that we can derive from this is that even when we are surrounded by the world, even when we have our smartphones connecting us to Facebook and GroupMe and Twitter and Line and what are all those photo ones? Photo Bucket, whatever. Even with all that connection, we are still independent, and in the end, we are all alone in a very real way. So that's how we do a Tp-Castt analysis. And you'll notice how much meaning we were able to derive from a 6-line poem. When you do your longer poems, you're going to go through this process, and it's going to be important for you to take your time. Do 1 poem per day. You'll end up with 5. If you do 1 poem per day, you'll give yourself time to sit in the poem and decide what's important. You'll notice that throughout I highlighted different words based on what I was doing. Connotation is about crag and crooked hands and wrinkled sea, etc. But when I talked about attitude, I focused on lonely lands and ringed with the azure world and mountain walls. And when I talked about the shift, it was the last line. So really pay attention to the details and really look for what it is that means the most. And use this form to help you understand the poems that you're going to be looking at.